I've covered Sony forcing developers to censor their games tons of times now. Sony doesn't care about developers and what they want to create. They only care about games that go onto their platforms making as much money as possible, and they've definitely changed over the past few years because they used to allow basically anything onto their storefronts. But now, in the most bizarre case of censorship that I've probably seen yet, they've forced a company to completely reskin their new lewd game and made them change the ladies to bunnies. But before we get into the topic at hand, if you enjoy the content that I create, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media like Twitter or Minds to see when my content is posted. And if you do really enjoy the videos and the live streams that I create, please consider becoming a Dark Titan via Patreon for just $1 a month or supporting via memberships. All of the links are in the description, and of course, I do really appreciate all of the support. So I'm going to start off with this Nintendo Life article. It says Sony's censors strike again as Switch gets 20 ladies while PS4 gets 20 bunnies. So it says East Asia Soft, a company whose games include Waifu Uncovered and Hentai vs. Evil, have just shown off their latest take on the girls wearing uncomfortably tight underwear genre, 20 Ladies, in which you complete simple platforming puzzles to gather up all of your lost ladies, and the ladies are pretty much nude. For some reason, maybe all of their trousers were shredded by spike spinning traps that litter the levels of this game. Poor ladies. Now, of course, this article does make kind of a big joke out of it, but all censorship is important. Now, the artwork for the ladies and also the bunnies, in my opinion, isn't the best work that I've ever seen, and I know a few people have just viewed it as, oh, it's an indie game, so it doesn't really matter, but all censorship matters. Now, the game, as it says, is a platformer where you're going around collecting the ladies slash bunnies, in some cases on PlayStation platforms, and the gameplay for this doesn't look bad, at least in my opinion. It looks a little bit generic, maybe. It looks like something we've probably seen a bunch of times, but it's not the worst thing that I've ever seen. It looks like something people could have fun with for a couple of hours. But scrolling down, it says, yes, for PlayStation players, the scantily clad lasses of 20 ladies have been replaced with fully clothed rabbit women. Thanks to Sony's strict rules on censorship, check out the differences in the description. Now, in the trailer with the ladies, they aren't wearing much. They're basically nude, so it's not that shocking that Sony forced them to change their designs. I honestly wish that I could say I was surprised and that this sounded out of the ordinary, but it's exactly what I expect from Sony at this point. I used to love Sony so freaking much, but over the years they've changed for the worse, and this is a good example of how they've changed and what they've changed. Sony has a nasty history of censorship. I talk about it all the time. I mean, they've tried to censor a scene in Devil May Cry 5 with Triss and her nude butt. They've forced developers to remove intimacy modes from titles. They do not like games with attractive women. This is another situation that happened a couple of months ago that I thought that I would bring up so you guys understand the scope of Sony's censorship if you're new to hearing about Sony. It says PlayStation release of Doki Doki Literature Club censors iconic scene in order to comply with Sony content regulations. This was a situation that I had talked about that a lot of people were really upset over. It says a Doki Doki Literature Club creator has revealed that one of the indie visual novel's most iconic scenes was censored in the recent PlayStation 4 release of the title's expanded edition in order to comply with Sony's content regulations. We hear all the time about Sony's content regulations, all the things they force developers to censor, and it sucks. If you're a PlayStation player, you should be able to play the types of games on their platform you want. They should be, in my opinion, allowing basically anything onto their platforms, but of course, that's not the way that it goes. It says Salvato revealed the censorship on June 30th, the same day that Doki Doki Literature Club Plus released digitally for PC and consoles, in a post that he shared on his blog. In the post, he addressed fan concerns that based on the game content, DDLC might have certain parts of the game censored or otherwise altered in order to comply with regulations. He said, "We feel confident in the nuance of DDLC's content content, but we also know that certain platforms might have regulations that we wouldn't be an exception to, aka Sony. The indie creator then assured fans that he had already decided long ago that if I was required to remove specific scenes from DDLC in order to publish it to a platform, then I would not publish it on that platform. However, the big situation here was the fact that he said, oh, if I had to remove specific scenes, I wouldn't publish the game, but he didn't mention, changing content in the game, because that's what they did with DDLC for Sony. They ended up changing the content. According to Salvato, the censored scene in question is the one which occurs towards the end of Act 2 in the classroom just before the weekend starts, when Yuri confesses her love to the protagonist. In this scene, regardless of whether or not the player chooses to reciprocate or reject Yuri's feelings, she ends up stabbing herself and bleeding out on the floor in the club's member room. Now, I quickly wanted to read some of this article that talks about Sony's censorship guidelines. It says, as has been obvious for some time, Sony is cracking down on sexually explicit material as it pertains to questionably aged characters. While the specifics of its regulations remain under wraps, a Wall Street Journal report on the recently introduced policy reveals that the Japanese company has become increasingly concerned that its global reputation could take a hit from explicit content sold only in a few markets, and it's talking about titles like Dead or Alive Extreme 3 Scarlet. We've heard a lot of companies over the past few years talk about global reputation and wanting to make their games for global markets, which means they're basically going to censor anything that could be seen as offensive or seen as too questionable for them. It says, according to the aforementioned publication, the PlayStation maker has been paying attention to movements such as the hashtag #MeToo one, as well as the rise in popularity of game streaming on sites such as YouTube and Twitch. In essence, it's concerned by content which may be perceived as demeaning to women, and in particular, titles which appear to depict underage characters in explicit situations. Franchises like Senran Kagura, for example, are guilty here. Now, I think that this argument is absolutely ridiculous, saying, oh, we want to respect women and we don't want any games demeaning towards women on our platform, so we're going to force developers to censor their games. That is absolutely ridiculous. I, as a woman, love games like Dead or Alive and Senran Kagura, and others do too. It says, because developers have to get Sony's approval before releasing on the PlayStation 4 and now PlayStation 5, it's requesting alterations or changes to software that it deems to be inappropriate, which of course we know there's no set clear and concise guidelines for developers when it comes to content. They basically have to submit a game and then Sony comes back and says it's okay or it's not okay, and you have to change a bunch of things. There's not a list of guidelines like, oh, you can't have X, Y, and Z in your game. I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to say, oh, it really doesn't matter if they were changed from ladies to bunnies. It's not that big of a deal. It's just an indie game, but all censorship matters, and Sony's censorship is bad for the gaming industry. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.